And now we get to the Mughal Empire. The Mughal Empire begins about a couple of decades after the beginning of the Safavid dynasty. The Mughal Empire has its beginnings in the early 1500s and is founded by Babur, who his full name is Zahir Uddin Muhammad Babur. So you can guess his religion there. And Babur is actually a tribal chieftain who has a lot of pull in the area because he is descended from Genghis Khan from his father's side, and from his mother's side, he is descended from Tamerlane, the Hunnic leader and warrior. So he has really good bloodline, and so because of this, he's a very important person, very well respected, and he begins to bring in allies and then conquer other people. And by 1504, he's going to capture power in Kabul here in what is now Afghanistan. So you have Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then India. So he captures power here in Kabul and begins to spread out, taking Kandahar and then beginning to move into the uppermost delta of the Indus River. And once he captures power and begins to expand, you can see here that the Safavid Empire is going to be pushing up to about his westernmost boundary, and he's able to actually keep good relations with the Safavids by through diplomatic means, because he is the Mughals are a more of a Sunni Islam, and so the Shia Safavids being the basically enemies of Sunni, he's able to, through diplomatic means, keep good relations with the Safavids, but at the same time improving relations with the Ottomans, bringing people in under that he conquers in under Islam, and creating a better relationship with the Ottomans, especially in the Indian Ocean, and beginning to acquire munitions and other other weapons, and helping them with the trade of gunpowder. So this really helps both the Ottomans and Safavids, for the Mughal people to be the intermediaries between China and the Middle East, to be able to push gunpowder over while at the same time getting better weapons from the other peoples. Uh, and so, in doing so, from Kabul here, he's going to invade India by 1519. So, in 1504, he takes power in Kabul, begins to spread his empire down into what is now Pakistan, and by 1519 he invades India, going through the Khyber Pass. Now, anybody that has military experience or has been stationed over there knows about the Khyber Pass. The Khyber Pass is the basically the only valley, the only real easy way for armies to make it through Pakistan into India. And here is the Khyber Pass. You have basically the Himalaya mountain range on either side of this valley, and there is a clear path to go through here. This is the path that Alexander the Great took to make it into India. This is the path that the Vedic empires way back took to get into India. So this is the way to go through. Even to this day, it's one of the most heavily guarded and secure border in the world, because this is the easiest way to get things in and out of India. So he goes through the Khyber Pass, and by 1526, he's made it all the way into the heart of the Indian empires there. And in 1526, you have the Battle of Panipat, and he will win that and then occupy Delhi. So between 1504 and 1526, you see Babur bringing his tribal Pakistan Afghani forces, Gurkha forces, down into India and conquering Delhi and setting up a new dynasty there in Delhi. So 1526 is really seen as the beginning of the Mughal dynasty, even though in 1504 is really when Babur starts the uh, consolidates power and begins his march. So 1526 is about when the official start of this new dynasty begins. And so Babur actually dies in 1530. He had planned to have this long reign and set up a strong central government, but things happened and he ends up dying really quickly after setting up his new dynasty. And so, because of his death, his son Humayun has to take over. And as you can see here, there is quite a bit of a gap in his reign. And part of that is because he is an inept ruler. Babur wasn't the greatest of teachers and was always off fighting. Um, had too much too much conquering to do and not enough time to effectively teach his son the practical methods of being an effective leader. And so Humayun will bring in his cronies. He will bring in incompetent people to run his government, and corruption will just boom throughout his entire reign. And the Mughal emperors coming in are conquering a people that hadn't been unified for a while. And so, with all this corruption, that actually gets the people to unify. And this leads to a short lived new. Uh, Hindu dynasty known as the Suri dynasty. The Suri dynasty basically takes over what the Mughals had conquered, and the Mughals also lose their old land of Kabul and to the Safavids. So the Mughals have lost both on the west and on the east their empire, and here in India they are. Overtaken, and this new dynasty basically fixes Humayun's corruption, puts good people in charge, creates a strong central government, and basically has everything ready and prepared um, to move forward and have this great Hindu state. However, Humayun is able to get some of his best warriors together despite himself, and they overtake the Suri dynasty. And Humayun is put back in power, although in within a year he is deposed by his son Akbar the Great. Akbar the Great is going to, in 1556, consolidate power. He's going to make the people that were in charge of the Suri dynasty subservient to him. He's not going to remove them completely. He's going to make sure that they continue to run things as well as they have, uh, keep the machine. Moving along as it will, but at the same time, he's going to make himself the absolute power in the empire. So basically, he takes the best part of the Ottoman Empire, which is leaving local leaders in charge, keeping domestic peace by not being so strict on religious conversion. And then he takes the best part of the Safavid dynasty, which is a strong central government where the leader has his fingers in every pot. And he brings those two ideas together and creates a very, very strong government and begins to expand his empire. He actually triples the size of his empire as he goes throughout, leading to a new golden age of India and bringing in cultural and economic changes throughout. Now, Akbar had been exposed to beliefs uh, uh, beyond his Muslim upbringing, and he really took a liking to Indian art, especially because during the Suri dynasty, the Mughals had been removed from uh, their traditional homelands in modern day Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so he was basically raised in India and seen the wonders of India, and so that was why he really began to try to um, push for cultural uniformity and economic changes that would make India prosper. And so here you can see the land that the Mughal Empire starts here in Kabul, here down to Kandahar, and by 1525, Babur has made it into India, and then between 1525 and 1605, you can see the land that's added here. Basically, this giant land here becomes the Mughal Empire, and then we'll look further later on at what Aurangzeb's able to do. So, so as I said earlier, this Surrey, the short-lived Surrey dynasty was a Hindu dynasty, and like most of the people in India at the time, the leaders there were Hindu. Well, this minority. Uh, Religious minority leadership just came in that are Muslim. So the idea is here that the Mughals are strict Muslims, and while their new subjects are Hindu, the Hindu people outnumber them greatly, and the Mughals are a minority in the country. And the question would be like, how do you rule effectively? How do you, as a minority government, come in um, and take charge of a country like this, especially a strong Hindu, a very proud Hindu people that aren't really uh, easily ruled by others? And how do you, as a very strong Muslim, rule effectively? And so the Mughal solution was to, when it came to religion, promote religious tolerance, like the Ottomans did. Promote religious tolerance and allow people to you know, to live their religious lives the way that they want to. And Akbar was really good about this. As I said, he'd been exposed to other beliefs before, and as he became the ruler, he continued this, and he would have people come and debate him. He would have Christian missionaries, Jewish rabbis, Sunni and Shia Muslim uh, um, teachers come and talk to him and debate with him. He'd have Zoroastrians come in. He would have Buddhists. He would have Taoists. He would have all these different religious people come and talk to him because he was very curious about religion, and he was very curious about the wonders of the universe. And so he would often entertain um, other people of differing religions, and he encouraged that among his populace to tolerate religious differences. He also didn't replace the Maharajas or any local customs. He wanted to make sure that, you know, the culture of India remained, and adding in some of his own Persian and uh, Asian influences from his own culture, bringing those in and sort of intermixing, and he would also intermarry with a Rajput princess, Mariam Uz Zamani, a princess of a Hindu princess from Rajputistan, and he would marry her, begin this merging of the two peoples. And this merging would continue later on as he would basically get tired of Islam, as the Safavid people, as some of his counselors would tell him that, you know, that tolerating other religions was against the will of God, and so he decided that he was going to move away from Islam and actually create his own religion, Din Ilahi, which is actually a syncretic religion, and that by that it means that it brings in differing religious beliefs and tries to merge them together. So he would look at the Hindu gods and say, well, they're aspects of God, or they are angels that you would find in the Quran or in the Bible, and begins to merge those two religions together. And we'll talk more about syncretic religions when we go into the Americas. But he wanted to bring in the best of Hinduism, the best of Islam, and create something new. And for that, everyone hated him. The Muslims were incensed that he would corrupt the Quran, and the Hindu people were incensed that he would try to take their gods and reshape them in his image, as they said. So basically, it ended up, he tried to please everyone, and we all know that if you try to please everyone, it ends up pleasing nobody. So Dina Ilahi is the name of the religion that created, which we'll go over more in class this week. So that's how the Mughals tried to fix these religious issues, is by basically creating this, you know religious tolerance, not removing leaders, and creating a new religion. Culturally, the Mughal, especially Akbar, as the Mughal leader, created a new nobility that was loyal to Akbar, basically from the military aristocracy, not only of his own people, but also of India. So people like the Rajputs in northeast India, all of the local warriors that had fought against them, the Suris that had overthrown his father, all of these people that proved themselves worthy. He gave them the choice to die or to join him, and most of them would join him, and created a new nobility that was very loyal to him, that enjoyed his leadership, and were very willing to keep the peace for the Mughals, because the Mughals were coming into a place of chaos and they were creating order. And so this new aristocracy isn't going to try to overthrow the system, because it is a stable system. He also implemented a modern government that uh, had different branches of government and different checks and balances between them. Everyone but the emperor, that is, the emperor was the key figure in society and in politics. No one was above him, but this new modern government had different branches with different functions, and was set up to work autonomously. But Akbar really kept his finger on the pulse of the nation, and always knew what was going on. He also supported cultural developments. Here you see a game of human chess that he would play. He would often play against visiting noblemen or visiting scholars. He also supported art, architecture, science, technology. So he really put in a lot of money and a lot of time into a new cultural system in India, trying to bring back the glory of India and create a new, even more glorious India. Society in under the Mughal people also began this merging of the two cultures. Language, you still had Persian um, as a language of the people. Hindu was also kept, but for the most part, people were encouraged to learn Persian, to be able to speak in Persian. You also had Arabic kept around for religious purposes. Arabic being the main language, written language of Muslims, and people were expected to learn Arabic for religious purposes. And then he also created this new sort of mix between Persian, Hindu, and Arabic, known as Urdu, that was taught for the nobility. And it was basically a mixture of all of these languages. So if you knew Urdu, you could understand Persian, Arabic, and Hindi, and just be able to function completely in society by knowing this language, and this sort of language was kept just for the nobility, even though to this day Urdu is now one of the official languages of Pakistan. Government, as I said, he had a modern government with a system of checks and balances. You had um, the revenue department headed by the vizier, and this was responsible for all finances. You had the military separate from the civilian government. This had a Mir Bakshi in charge of the military, and he was appointed from the leading nobles of the court. So it wasn't a hereditary position; it was one that was appointed. So the head of the military was the best fighter or the best strategist. Uh, as far as the imperial household, you had the Mir Saman, who was in charge of the royal court. He was in charge of the royal bodyguard. Was in charge of making sure that the palace and the palace functions ran smoothly and was sort of separate from the rest of government. And then finally, you had the judiciary that was headed by a Qazi, who was responsible for religious beliefs and practices, was responsible for making sure that the religious laws were being kept, and was responsible for making sure that these new these new subjects weren't being treated unfairly as part of the religious laws in Mughal society. There was this idea that everyone should be treated fairly, no matter what their religious identities were. Culturally, the art combines aspects of Persian and Indian culture. So you can see here the mosaics of Persian culture mixed with some of the clothing of India, the landscapes of India, and here you see more of the dress, the much more Persian dress on Indian people. So it begins to combine both cultures artistically and architecturally. This is the greatest period in architecture in India, mainly because of the great buildings that are built and the great textiles that are created. The best building here being the Taj Mahal, which was built from 1632 to 1653, and we'll come back to this. Women in the Mughal period, it is that women at this time actually gained some prominence under India's the Hindu patriarchy was very harsh on women, was very strict on the way that they were allowed. Not allowed to own any property or have any sort of business outside of their home. When the Mughals come in, women from at least from aristocratic families are permitted to own land and engage in business, which allows them to widow didn't have to be at the mercy of her husband's family or her children, and instead could own land and engage in business practices once they achieve some sort of freedom. Now, this is still a patriarchal society, and women are subjected to the restrictions of Islamic law. Outside of the home, the women were isolated from men, and this is still a male-dominated society. This is still a society where women are subservient to men, where women are the not so much the property, but they are not valued as much as men. They are bargaining chips. There are ways for men to and families to rise in power, to be used um, as diplomatic prizes, as far as the nobility goes, and in the home, there is this isolation outside of the home. There is this isolation from men, between men and women under strict Islamic law. But this was an improvement within the home, as men were much more strictly taught that in the home that women must be treated with great respect, and there were several penalties for abusing women and being an abusive husband. Whereas with Vedic Hindi law, it wasn't as important to treat your wife fairly in the home or outside of the home. During the late 16th century and into the 17th century, you're going to see Akbar continue to expand the empire, continue to consolidate power, and continue to bring about religious and cultural improvements in India. But ultimately, like all of us do, Akbar will die. He will have ruled for almost 50 years, and he has three sons that are two of whom are ready to take over, that are respected and seen as accomplished, but that's not who will take over. He'll be succeeded by Jahangir. Jahangir is his eldest and only remaining son. The other two actually die of alcoholism and opium addiction. Jahangir is seen as not really ready to take charge, and he begins to allow corruption and poor management to seep into the empire. Um, After the death of Jahangir, you have uh, the um, the rule of Prince Kuram, and Prince Kuram sees what happened during his father's reign, during Jahangir's reign, with more secularism, more corruption, and basically flaunting of Muslim laws. And so Shah Jahan, or Prince Kuram, actually undergoes a conversion and changes his name to Shahabuddin Muhammad Shah Jahan, and under Shah Jahan, you see the beginnings of a much stricter Muslim rule. Uh, is under Shah Jahan that you will have the Taj Mahal built. The His wife will pass away, and in his mourning, Shah Jahan will build the Taj Mahal, and begin to as a mausoleum for his wife. He will also go to war with the Portuguese, as the Portuguese are starting to really set up a hold on parts of India, which we'll go over more next week. And so during these 40 years of almost 40 years of rule, Shah Jahan begins to take back some of the edicts that Akbar and Jahangir had set up, and begins to reform the government with a much stricter government, much less uh, much less tolerant government. And this all comes to a head with the reign of Jahan's son, Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb deposes his father and kills his brothers. Shah Jahan is actually made to live in the Taj Mahal, live out his days in the Taj Mahal, which were completed in 1653. So basically, it's a little over a decade old, and that becomes his home for the rest of his life. Aurangzeb goes and reverses all the religious policies that had come before him since the time of Akbar, 60 plus years prior. Great grandfather Akbar, so many decades prior. Aurangzeb is going to completely change the way that India is ruled by this Mughal minority. He reverses all religious freedom and imposes strict Muslim rule on his Hindu subjects, much like the Safavids uh, i- are are imposing their Islam on their subjects. That's exactly what Aurangzeb is doing. He executes any opponents and isolates himself from the outside. As he begins to consolidate even more of the power, executing any of his opponents, he becomes pretty paranoid and begins to lock himself away from the outside world. And he becomes a very isolated ruler. as opposed to the other rulers that were much more open and much more willing to receive people. Military, he's able to expand the empire to twice its size through brute strength. You see him basically uh, bringing India together like it had not been seen before. You had the largest expansion, the largest empire in the Indian subcontinent uh, up to this time period, up to the 1600s. And so, because of his reversing religious freedom, political machinations, and the expansion of power, he makes a lot of enemies. Catholics are enraged by religious persecution. The Hindu majority is angry, and rebellions are going to spring up really, really soon. And so most of his later years of reign are spent quelling rebellions throughout his territory. And so after Aurangzeb passes away, though, there's no real strong leaders. And you see a steady decline of the empire. And that's what happens to a lot of these empires is you have only up to a certain point a very strong leader, and then comes weak leaders and this decline of the empire. And that's exactly what happens here. You see that in the Ottoman Empire later on. You definitely see it in the Safavid dynasty as well. And so uh, now we'll look at the downfall of these empires and what these downfalls mean to the Indian subcontinent, to Persia, and really what it means to the entirety of the world. So, with the Ottoman downfall, you see this what ends up being their downfall is this end of expansion. Instead of continuing to take control of North Africa, maybe move into sub-Saharan Africa, and even explore out west, instead you see an end of expansion and setting up vassal states in North Africa instead of continuing to rule directly. You see a lot of succession problems, especially after the death of Suleiman. You have lots of lesser leaders that comes after him. The administrative system becomes broken. As I said before, there was a lot of autonomy led to local leaders. And if you don't have a strong central leader, that means the local leaders are going to just become that much stronger. And that's what happens here. The autonomy of the local leaders leads to a power shift. So they become much more powerful. They're able to rebel or to break away or to gain much more autonomy and become vassal states. And so the Ottomans don't have as complete a control over their own empire as they once did, which leads to a weaker empire and ultimately a smaller empire. And then, of course, the Ottomans are continuing to try to expand into Europe, which is a lot more war, and that means less money. It's very costly to fight these battles, especially with cannons and cavalry, footmen, ships. All these. Uh, um, all these figures total up to a great amount, and that leads them to have less money for things like trade or cultural improvement or technological improvement. So that's fighting against Europe. But then, of course, they begin to fight against the Safavid as well. So the Safavid and the Ottoman are fighting against one another, leaving the western edge of the Ottoman Empire to basically be an afterthought. And the Safavid are actually going to ally with the Habsburgs in the Holy Roman Empire, as the Ottomans are allied with the French. You see the Safavids taking a cue from them and allying with the Holy Roman Empire, leading to much more of a inter-religious conflict and a lot more strategic alliance for the Safavids would actually um, ex, uh, extends the battles between the Safavids and the um, Ottoman. And like I said, this leads to a decline in science and technology. Material affluence is going to increase as people begin to want more gold, want more goods. And so they're going to be spending less on science and technology, more on conquest, more on material wealth. And that leads to the Ottomans not really keeping up with the technological advancements of Europe. The Safavids are also going to deal with the death of a great leader. After Abbas the Great, you have a succession conflicts that plague the dynasty. His sons and grandsons are all um, trying to one up on one another and take control of the dynasty. Uh, Unlike the Ottomans, the Safavids had a much more centralized government, but that central government was so tightly packed around the Shah that it was harder to control the edges of society. And the fact that it was hard to control the border, it was hard to control the outlying areas, combined with the fact that they were oppressing the minority, that leads to a lot of unrest. That leads to a lot of rebellions in places away from the central government, away from Isfahan. And so you have armies having to go out throughout the empire and quell rebellions, which leads to a, a lack of of expansion outward when you're constantly having to move throughout and put down rebellions. And then the Safavids are going to make the mistake of trading with Europe, especially with the Dutch and the English East India Company. So as the Safavids are losing money, as they're fighting against the Ottomans, as they're um, trying to quell rebellions, you have the Dutch and the English beginning to monopolize trade throughout the Indian Ocean. And so pretty soon it is going to be the Safavids that are coming to the English, asking for money, and the English and the Dutch are going to monopolize the trade, and they're going to um, turn the tables on the Safavids, and instead of the Safavids being able to control the prices of their goods, instead it'll be the Dutch and English that force the prices onto the Safavids. And then you have invasions as the Ottomans move north into Persia, and as Uzbeki and Khanate raiders in the east begin to push into eastern Persia. The Ottomans are moving in, and so you're having this complete battle for over a century. It's going to be even after the Afghanis taken have begun to split away from the Ottomans, that Afghanis are going to finally take Isfahan in 1722. So you have, in the death of Abbas in the um, early 17th century leads to a downfall by the end of the 17th century. Abbas the Great dies in 1629, and it's just a steady downward march. So by 1722, less than 100 years after that, um, the empire has been invaded, Isfahan has been destroyed, and the Safavids are forced to flee to the eastern edge. And by 1794, the entire empire will fall, and you will start seeing a new Persian empire spring up out of those ashes. So, really, warfare and this oppression of minorities and this this real um, this real lack of forward thinking after the death of Abbas is what's ultimately going to lead the Safavids um, to crumble under the weight of their own ambitions. And then finally, we'll look at the Mughal Empire, what happens to them. So, as I said, when I'm talking um, about the Safavids, Safavids had tried to control some of the trade in the Indian Ocean. Well, by the early 1700s, the Portuguese are going to have a monopoly in the Indian Ocean. The English and Dutch then begin competing and begin to take away some of that domination by the Portuguese, and then the British are going to have influence over the Mughals. The British are going to start to take over administrative control uh, from the Mughal people, from the Mughal rulers. They're basically going to buy land from the Mughals and take away the autonomy of the Mughal people. And this basically happens because the Mughals are constantly fighting, constantly expanding, lots of corruption. This leads to a lot of economic difficulties as the East India companies take over as a disaster for the Indian people. You can see here this map in 1765. The red portions are portions that are controlled directly by the English East India Company, while the other parts green and yellow are either under influence or free. And then by 1805, East India Company has conquered a lot of the land, not even by warfare, but through buying it. And profits are sent back to Britain instead of being spent in India. All the money that the East India Company are making from the resources are being sent back to Britain. And so, as British imports come in, local industries are destroyed. You can see here by 1837, almost the entirety of the southern India is under British control, East India control, and they have really by 1857 taken control of most uh, of the country. I believe it's like 60% of India is under control by the English East India Company, and later on by the British government itself. Um, so as the East India Company begins to buy up the land, they begin to put up taxes on that land. So the people that are living on the land have to pay taxes, and if they don't pay taxes, then they're kicked out of there. They're confiscated. All that land is confiscated, and so local industries are destroyed. Land tax allows for the confiscation of this land, and the British East India Company continues to buy up India and sends profits because they're still making profits. They're able to buy this land for pennies on the dollar, or pennies on the would it be shillings on the pound, and being able to uh, move it back to England. And this really fuels a lot of the resources and the profits are going to fuel a lot of the industrial revolution, which we will get to later on this semester. And so that is the defeat of the Muslim empires. The Ottomans are defeated by uh, expanding themselves too long, giving too much control to their vassal states or their outlying regions. The Safavids, their downfall is too much central control and oppressing the people, while the Mughals spend too much money. The Mughals uh, spend are over controlling later on. Aurangzeb really messes things up, and this allows the English to come in and take control. So this defeat of the Muslim empires allows Europe to really turn west. There is a lack of a threat from the east. The Ottoman Empire, the Safavids, the Mughals, they are no longer a threat to Europe. And so the European powers don't have to worry about anybody invading from the east, and they're able to actually turn on each other. This is why you have a lot of um, European turmoil is because they don't have to worry about anyone else. They don't have to worry about any invaders from the east, and they're able to vie for control of Europe amongst themselves. You also see Islam becoming isolated as interfaith struggles become much more pronounced, as Sunni Islam has to counter Shia Islam, as Shia Islam has to continue to try and impose its will upon the majority of as Muslims. You see a lot of different interfaith struggles and a lot of reforms that are meant to fix Islam. A lot of those reforms taking the form of conservative Islam and much more strict fundamental Islam. And this is going to lead to future clashes of cultures, especially in the Balkans, as Muslims are a minority in the Balkans. They begin to become an oppressed minority, and that's going to lead to future issues up the road. But most importantly of all of this is that Christianity is triumphant um, in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. Christianity is triumphant. Europe is triumphant, and the East basically is diminished greatly. Well, I hope you enjoyed that second lecture, looking at the downfall of Muslim empires in this time period from the 1500s into the 1600s. So in this week's class, we'll go over some of these things in depth a little bit more, and then we'll be setting up for next week as we look towards the conquest and exploration by European forces in the East. So thanks everybody for this lecture, and I will go ahead and get back to this meeting I have with some of these Mughals. I don't think they're going to be happy with what's in store for them.